panic attacks, agoraphobia, baking anxiety, specific phobias, dramatic improvement, if not complete recovery. In 20 years as a psychotherapist, hands down, EMDR was the most effective technique I found in working with anxiety with my clients. So I'm not only certified in EMDR as a therapist, I'm also an approved consultant. And today I'm going to give you an idea about how EMDR works with anxiety. And then also stay tuned, because at the end I'm going to talk about a couple of types of anxiety problems that are a little more challenging for EMDR. But I'm guessing you might be watching this because you've tried a number of things for your anxiety and you're wondering, does this sort of crazy thing called EMDR help? So as a quick summary as to why EMDR helps with anxiety, EMDR is like shining a light into a corner. And when you shine a light into a corner and there's bugs there, bugs scamper away. You don't shine that light, they don't go away. We sometimes have to go into things we don't really want to look at to really cure the problem we're having. Now, the other thing that makes EMDR brilliant, in my opinion, and almost poetic in a way, like that might sound a little strong, but it's really kind of true that as I worked with people, there was sort of a poetry in their stories and how it connected to EMDR. Clients often don't like to be told by a therapist, oh, you have all this anxiety because of what happened to you as a kid, right? A lot of people don't even want to hear it. They'll be like, that happened years and years ago. I'm over it or forgotten about it. I don't even think about it. So one part of EMDR that's really beautiful is that the client goes where they need to go. It is not therapist-led. It's client-led. So with EMDR, you start with your current day problem. Let's say it's anxiety. So just bring to mind right now something you're anxious about, right? And if you really give yourself time to think about it, you'll know it goes with not just the thoughts, not just the images, not just sort of like the storyline, but also what you feel in your body, where you feel it. And it also goes with some type of negative core belief. So if you start with today, we're just starting with today. What is that negative core belief? What's the anxiety about? And where do you feel it in your body? And then you take that and you float back. Is that combination of things, that negative core belief, those feelings, both emotional and physical, are they familiar? Do you have early memories that are very much the same? What is your earliest memory of feeling that way? It's up to you to bring that into the EMDR. So this isn't about a therapist making some kind of assessment of like, oh, if you lived through XYZ and your family was like this and blah, 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 then you'd be experiencing this. No, your body will tell you what earlier memories need to be processed. I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. Somebody that I worked with who was afraid of flying, when she did her float back, she went to a memory of being around 5 years old where she was playing with a group of kids, siblings, neighborhood kids, and she got locked in a small kind of garden house, right? It was just like a little small garden house, but the kids locked her in there sort of as a joke. They didn't know what they were doing. That's the memory she went to. She was trapped in there. She has no idea how long because she was 5. It seemed like a really, really long time. We don't even know, and it doesn't matter. But that experience got embedded in her emotional brain. Like way back here, that experience was embedded. And anytime she was in a really closed space, but in particular on airplanes, she would go into a panic. So through EMDR, she was able to bring up that memory, go over it and over it until the memory itself was desensitized. The whole memory changed. So initially when she came to that memory, she re-experienced all of that. She could feel it. She could really feel it like in her body, right? The whole thing. And then after the EMDR, where you do the bilateral stimulation, it's either with the light bar that goes like, here, or it could be in your ears, or it could be tappers in your hand. You can tap yourself. After the bilateral stimulation, the memory was desensitized. So that's the D in EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So the memory was completely desensitized for her. And then it had to be reprocessed, right? Because the negative core belief she ended up with was, I'm trapped. And that was true at the time. She was trapped, right? But she's no longer trapped as an adult. And when you're on a plane, you're there by choice and you know what's happening. You know why you have to be there. You're not trapped. So being able to reprocess that, yes, at that time I was trapped, but I was rescued. My parents came to find me. I was okay. Everything's okay. I don't have to go through that again and again. Obviously, some of this sounds really kind of, I don't know, it's too easy, right? From here, but we're talking about the mammalian brain, the emotional brain, and that's the part that needed to be convinced that she wasn't experiencing that again. So I want to share one more story with you. It's about Eric, who was experiencing acrophobia and it was limiting his job. And he utilized a program called virtual EMDR, which is sort of a in-between self-help and going to a therapist. And he agreed to be interviewed by me about it so that he could share his experience with people because he found it super helpful. So I'm going to share a little clip with you here from the video with Eric.
It affects my business. So I did a gig like about a month ago and it was like really high up and I couldn't do it. Like I legit, I was there, but I could not get to the table and actually physically do my job, but I could be there. Like I was there and I was like, you know what, let me just desensitize myself, but I couldn't physically do the work. Like I was like having panic attacks and it was just really, really bad.
So Eric saw a therapist and she helped, but he felt like it really wasn't getting to the core of the issue. And he found my channel and he downloaded a PDF I have on transforming your negative core beliefs. And he really related to it. He really felt like I have some kind of deep-seated negative core belief that's impacting this. So he saw some of the material I have on EMDR and he decided to give the virtual EMDR program a try. And within the first 2 sessions, he was feeling better.
I feel like the EMDR yesterday when I had a gig in a place that was a rooftop, I was like, you know what, let me just do this before. And I think the core beliefs is a big realization. And I do think that I have a little bit of PTSD as well, because I did that. And I feel like when I handled the situation a lot better. Like I literally told myself, like, you're loved, you can control your future. The past is irrelevant. Like everything that was in the positive reframing.
Right.
I went through it at the night and I did feel a little bit of, anxiety, but I felt so like better and optimistic.
And when you're working with EMDR with anxiety, you do have to let yourself feel that anxiety while you're imagining what you're anxious about. And Eric talked about that a little bit too.
It's weird because it tells you to like, you might feel extreme like anxiety. I literally put myself in the worst of the worst. Like, I'm like, you know what? Let me picture myself falling. Like I want to feel that anxiety. And then like I feel the extreme. And then in the second part, it's like a 10-minute where you're just, what's the opposite of this? What's the
Right.
positive? And then, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it like does like a breathing technique where you're just like reset it, like you're calming your nervous system down because you're literally just going up and down, up and down, up and down.
So even the first time you did it, you imagined kind of like the worst of this fear in a scenario and your anxiety went up while you were doing it with all the physiological. And then when they had you walk through the positive, it kind of calmed everything down a bit.
Yeah. So it's funny, right? So while you're looking at the ball moving from like, so I bring up a thought, right? Like, let's say like I'm at the mall and I'm by the ledge where I can look down. So I'm feeling the anxiety, right? I'm bringing it to mind and I keep bringing it and bringing it and bringing it. And it's kind of like the ball is kind of just like erasing the effect of like what I feel. It's really weird. But I will say that the first time, right? I was so excited. I went to the mall and I still felt it. You know, I still felt it. Like, I was like, oh my God, like I'm cured. I literally felt like it was a reset.
All right, so I said that I would share the types of anxiety that I found EMDR to be a little bit trickier with. And one of those is OCD, and the other is social anxiety. Now, it doesn't mean it isn't helpful, but I did find that with OCD, sometimes it was hard to get people out of the looping. And there are other treatments for OCD that have more research behind them. So there is research that EMDR can be helpful, but I also think that the very OCD-oriented exposure therapy is really the most helpful for OCD, and both OCD and social anxiety actually benefit from a combination of therapy and an SSRI. So that's always a little controversial to bring up medication, but that was my experience and observations. I don't prescribe. I'm not a medical doctor, okay? But the same kind of thing could happen with social anxiety in terms of the looping. However, social anxiety, I found, very often had a very distinct trigger event. If somebody's social anxiety could be traced through that float back process in EMDR to a specific bullying episode, or even an episode where maybe they gave a speech or they had to do a presentation in middle school and somehow they got very intensely embarrassed, then the EMDR could be super effective because it could go back and reprocess that event. So if you have an interest in checking out the software for virtual EMDR, I do have a link in the description to this video. And there's also a link to the PDF that Eric downloaded called Transform Your Negative Core Belief. And actually next week, I'm coming out with a video on which method of EMDR might be the best for you given what you are struggling with. So subscribe, you'll be notified when that video comes out, and I will see you then.